When you look at today's game and you look at the pass rushers, what are some of the core traits that you look for in elite pass rushers?
Well, I think when you talk about lean, a guy being able, let's back up. Hands. You talk about a guy, can he use his hands? Can he separate? Offensive linemen, they want to take away the space. It's our job to create space so they can't grab us and and have them put their hands on us and slow us down. So whenever I talk to young pass rushers, I always tell them, use your hands, create separation. Offensive linemen are like puppet. When you give them something, they shoot. You give them a little bit of something, they shoot. They're taught to shoot their hands. So you got to be able to use your hands really well, not give your whole frame, half a man. We always talk about getting half a man, giving them as least as possible when you're pass rushing. The other thing I think is really good when you watch really, really good pass rushers is their get off. I think Von Miller probably is the best in the game. He reminds me of the late, great Derek Thomas. When you talk about getting off the ball, that first step, whenever you do drills, working on that first step to gain ground, and then having moves to set up other moves. You can't be one-dimensional. I think you got to give a good offensive lineman, a lot of different moves to win and keep them mixed up and off balance.
If you're building a pass rusher, what is the first thing you'd want to start with?
Ooh, I would say getting off the ball, speed and explosion.
Yeah.
Being able to look and get off the ball. It really doesn't matter if you can't get off the ball in that first step and you don't have that explosiveness. It doesn't really matter. And then I think hands. I think hands is the best thing over it, especially long arm guys that have really long arms like myself. Hunter, you watch him. Zadarius Smith. There are a lot of players with really long arms. You can use that hand to separate yourself.
So when you think about the way guys progress going from college to the pros, how much of that stuff can be picked up when you are a pro? How much of it is natural? How much of it is something that you can learn from a good coach, kind of showing you how to sequence your moves?
I think there's certain guys that have the natural ability to pass rush. When you look at a lot of guys now, they're just great athletes, right? They're fast, they're great athletes, so a lot of these coaches don't develop them at a young age. They put them at the edge, and they say, just run around and tackle. And once you start going against, in college or in the pros, really good tackles, whether right or left tackles, you realize just that bend and that lean and that rip move don't work all the time. They figure that out. They figure that stuff out. So now you got to add different moves and things to your repertoire. Now you got to figure out, okay, if I beat him around the edge, what is he going to do? He's going to kick hard. He's going to get out there because the coach is going to say, hey, you got to get out there. You got to get your hands on him. You know that. So then you get off the ball as fast as you can. 1-2 step, boom. At that third step, you're inside. You're beating him inside because he's going to overset you. So now the coach is going to get on him, hey, you can't give up the inside. That's the fastest path to the quarterback. Don't be so aggressive. Mm-hmm. So now you got him thinking. Now you got him light. Now he's not jumping out. Now he's inside. Now he's sitting up higher. So now you come off the ball flying, and while he's thinking, trying to figure it out, boom, you give him that speed to power. So now you run him over. So there's a lot of different moves that you do, and I think with certain players who already have a speed rush, which most of them do, now what's the counter?
In thinking about two of the premier rushers in the league, you have Von Miller and you have Khalil Mack. Two guys that have been very productive, but they have different styles.
Yeah.
Von Miller, you talked about his speed, his get-off. Talk about Khalil Mack and how uncommon is it for a power rusher to be able to accumulate the sacks and the numbers that he's been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible with him. His hands are like stones. He's a powerful guy. But he is fast, too. He's explosive. He's just more powerful. So he uses it a little bit different. When you watch him rush, he's going to hit you with the power, but he's also agile and versatile enough to get off and make moves off of that. So his initial shock is he's coming off speed, power, explosiveness. He gets into you. He gives you that initial shock, and you see those linemen trying to catch themselves, and then he's off making a play. He's getting rid of them. He's shedding. And this is a guy who played linebacker, if I remember, at Buffalo. So he made all-pro at absolutely. Linebacker and at defensive end. So it just shows you the level of athleticism and the athlete that he is, what he's able to do. But that's rare. You don't find a lot of guys that's so explosive, that's so athletic, that is so powerful.
I'm really surprised you were never my teammate. And I'm surprised you were never my teammate in college because the greatest player that has ever done that was Lawrence Taylor.
Right.
Lawrence Taylor being a DN outside linebacker. So I want to take you all the way back to 1993. And I think we came to Anaheim and Carolina played USC in the Pigskin Classic. And I just wondered
There we go.
if at any time during that game when we're kind of running up and down the field, did you ever regret not wanting to be a Tar Heel? Did you ever regret not wanting to
Not
be
at all,
someone that came and stood in the shadows of Lawrence Taylor and learned how to play the game in a dominant fashion?
I love Lawrence Taylor. He was one of the guys that I watched. He was one of the linebackers. I watched Derek Thomas, like I said. I watched Lawrence Taylor, Andre Tippett. Those were my guys that I watched. And the one thing that I remember in playing you guys, the Tar Heels, down in Anaheim, was I didn't get a lot of action to my side. You know what I'm saying, DJ? You guys ran out our safety,
It was
Mike
31-9, Willie. What the heck, man?
Listen what I'm saying. They ran the ball more than they passed, though.
We ran the entire game. We only threw 7 passes.
Yeah, they ran the entire game, DJ.
I called one, though. I called a big one.
What they did was they were smart. They schemed well. They did not run at number 55. They ran out our safety. I'm not going to say no name, but he knows what I'm talking about.
We might have run the option little bit.
Right. They ran down to our down safety, and they did pretty well.
Hey, Willie, thank you so much for your time, man. And for those listening, look, this guy has a red jacket for being in the Patriots Hall of Fame. It's time he got a gold jacket and went into the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. There's nobody that dominated big games on the big stage from that position like Willie McGinnis did. 16 sacks in the postseason. Get this guy a gold jacket already. What's taking so long?
Appreciate it, DJ.
Hi, Jim. We had a chance to talk to a guy you know quite well, Willie McGinnis, talking about the edge position. And when I first talked to Willie, the first thing I think of, and even talk to him about it all the time, is, Willie, it's not easy for us to find guys like you. Just talking on Willie McGinnis as an edge rusher, how unique it is with his combination of size, power, speed, and everything he brought to the table.
Yeah, that's a great point, Daniel. I think it goes back to my time in New England, and Coach Belichick would always say certain guys don't grow on trees. So we really weren't out there looking for the next Willie McGinnis because they don't happen very often. But no, I think what Willie brought to the table was the biggest things were his combination of length and power. Usually long guys, sometimes struggle playing with a ton of power. Usually power players are more compact. But Willie was such a specimen, and then he could use that length, use that power, and he also had the speed factor too. So again, that's why he was such a high pick and such a productive NFL player. I think he in his career with most playoff sacks, something like that. But great rusher. But Willie was truly unique. I mean, you walk out on you know how it is. You go to a college football field, and if a guy pops out to you, you know he's an NFL prospect. Rarely do you go on an NFL practice field and a guy kind of sticks out. Well, Willie even stuck out on an NFL practice field. That's when you know you got a great one.
Hey, no doubt. You mentioned the combination of speed or power. Is it possible in your mind to be a successful edge defender, edge rusher in the National Football League if you don't have either speed or power?
I don't think so. I think you can win with your speed, you can win with power, and then you can win with your savvy and your know-how and your hand use and be a technician. But I think you have to have one element of the speed or the power, and it's the guys that can translate that speed to power, as you know. That's when you really start separating yourself and finding the guy. To me, the biggest thing is finding guys that know how to rush, and they can incorporate all those things and know how to use all their tools.
When you look at some of the guys you had in New England, obviously you had some prototype players and size was a big part of it. But when you look around the league in your time in the scouting world and you see guys like an Elvis Dumervil have success, even somebody, Lamar Woodley was not 6'5", but when you see guys that maybe lack that elite size but have success, and in a couple cases, you're not even talking about just blurs. We're not talking about somebody that's just a pure speed rusher, maybe somebody like a Vic Beasley. But what is it about the guys that don't have those ideal traits in terms of size that are able to be successful?
I think the two guys that you talked about, Elvis and Woodley, both the unique thing about both those guys were the body types. They were, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dumervil might have been right at 6 foot or even 5'11" and change. And I remember Lamar was right around 6'1", but they both had disproportionately long arms. Mm-hmm. So they did have the length factor working for them, which was huge. It can come in all shapes and sizes. You can't just pinpoint a body type, but one thing they usually have to have is arm length.
When you're watching the body coming off the edge and you're scouting, and you're getting ready to take your notes there, Jim, the first thing you look for as the snap begins is what?
Well, first thing would be snap anticipation. Some guys can really get off the rock. They just have a knack for it. And other guys, even though they're very explosive, you look at their 10-yard dash times coming out of the combine, and you don't see it equate to sack production. A lot of times when you go back after seeing a great 10-yard time, it's their reaction time off the ball is slow. So that's really the first thing I look at is can they anticipate the snap count and get off? And then how much ground do they cover with that first step? That first step explosion is key.
How about the ability to finish, Jim, the importance there and what you look for?
Yeah, that's a key thing too. Some guys are more disruptive than productive. That if that makes sense, they can get around the quarterback, but really getting them on the ground is the next step. You can't just affect throws. You got to get them on the ground. I think that being coached up and being around other great rushers, they can kind of teach you tricks of the trade. But I think one thing that if you see all great guys that can finish, they're not always going to get there and get a clean shot. I always look for grip strength in a rusher too, because if they can get around the quarterback and grab some cloth and pull that guy down, that's a key component to finishing.
Last question on these edge rushers. How important is it with scheme fit, or has that changed at all from when you started in the league? Look, we had kind of true 4-3 teams, true 3-4 teams. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes over the years, but is there still an importance you place on fit and scheme?
I think there is overall big picture in your defense, but I think if you can find a guy that can get to the quarterback, you got to find a place for him. There's so few guys that can really do it at a high level that if you find a guy that's maybe outside of your scheme and your prototype, you got to rely on your defensive coordinator, figure out a way to get them on the field and use them. Because again, as scouts, you and I, we go out on the road looking for those guys all year, and you might see one guy that can rush the quarterback the entire fall. So, I think coordinators are being they're just being more creative with how they design fronts nowadays. So I think you can get different body types, in different positions on the field, regardless of where you are.
Yeah, to summarize, you can rush the passer, we'll make room. We'll find a spot for you.
We'll find a spot for you.
Dude, I can't thank you enough for your time, man. It's awesome stuff. I really appreciate you, bud.
All right, excited to be joined by DeMarcus Ware. And when I say a prolific pass rusher, 138.5 sacks, I think, qualifies you as a prolific pass rusher. DeMarcus, first of all, thank you so much for the time today. Do you ever get sick of hearing that number?
You know what? I never get sick of hearing that number, especially now that I'm done. I always just think about, how did I do it? How did I actually be so consistent throughout my whole career?
As a great pass rusher, having been around other great pass rushers, is there something personality-wise that you guys all share?
The tenacity to get to the quarterback, being able to convert speed to power, being able to now push the guy to the quarterback, make the pocket right, but they're all team players. All great pass rushers are team players. And that's something that you can't, go out and get a miserable and say they run a 40 or they bench this. They actually have to sort of earn that captainship, what I call, that's my word, and they're usually the captain of the defense.
For you to bust out the fake spin move, walk us through how you came up with that. Was that something that just happened on the field? Did you prepare that? Because that's one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
There was something that, the fake spin move was not prepared at all. I actually was doing speed to set him up. And then the first time I spun, he spun with me. He was the only tackle. Joe Staley is one of those guys where he ad-libs when he pass blocking. And I spun, he spun, he's right in front of me. And I said, well, maybe third downs down the road, I could do a half spin. He'll think I was spin. He spins around and turns back, and then I can just go forward into the quarterback. And when that happened, I got off the ball, I had spun and turned, and I'm like, oh my God, he went for it. And lo and behold, there's the quarterback, and I just ran and got the sack. So it was an ad-lib thing. That's what you have to do as a rusher. You can't just say, I'm do speed, I'm do power. You got to change it up during the football game.
DeMarcus, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. Really appreciate it. All right, Buck, well, you get a chance to listen to guys of this caliber talking about the edge rusher in the NFL. And, man, I don't know if we could have found any better guests than the ones we had. Some great information there.
Great information. I think it's unique insight, particularly from DeMarcus Ware and Willie McGinnis, with DeMarcus Ware's ability to consistently get to the passer, the way that he became a dominant pass rusher, going from being a small school standout to really being one of the premier rushers in the game. The way that he breaks down his moves and the way he talks about setting up and sequencing moves was fantastic. And then with Willie McGinnis, just talking about what he looks for, the mentality, the mindset to be a dominant player. I just think those are nuggets that certainly help me when I think about how I'm evaluating pass rushers for the next level.
I love the analogy comparing a pass rusher to a pitcher. In other words, one pitch sets up another pitch, having a game plan of how you're going to attack an opponent. I love the getting inside the mindset of those edge rushers was fantastic. But now we're on the spot here. We've got to come up with who we believe is the prototype at the position. I'll give you the floor.
You know, this is one that's so unique for me because I had the opportunity to play with a Bruce Smith, a Reggie White, a Derek Thomas, and all those guys, and seeing how they dominate the game. You see how guys can do it in different ways, but there was something about the way Derek Thomas rushed that really fascinated me and intrigued me. That's why I believe Von Miller is the prototype at the position. When you think about first step get off, quickness, snap count anticipation, Von Miller has all of those things. When it comes to an array of tricks, a variety of moves that you can throw at the offensive tackle, he has those. Bend and burst, dip and rip. He has a nice little inside slip move that he uses. He is the guy that you always have to pay attention to because his speed to power, his ability just to run around the edge makes it so difficult to keep him off the quarterback.
Yeah, we're on the same page here because when I was thinking of this question, the prototype, who is the guy, I just thought of who's the guy you wouldn't want to face in a key situation, and that's where I came up with Von Miller as well. And we've talked about it, Buck. You write in the words "get off" in all bold when you're getting ready to evaluate edge rushers, and I don't know there's a better get off that I've seen than Von Miller. His ability to win right now, the suddenness off the edge, and then that sets up everything else he wants to do.
Sets it up, man. You talk about the fastball that he has. His ability to really jump off the snap is remarkable, and he is what I would call more of a finesse rusher because he does use his speed, his quickness, his athleticism, and movement skills to get home. I will say this because I believe this guy is probably a close second when you think about the prototype. Khalil Mack has to be mentioned in the conversation,
yeah.
And this is kind of challenging for me because I didn't know that a power rusher could ever be a guy that could consistently post high double-digit sacks because you really hadn't seen guys do that. Most of the guys that go down in the annals as the top rushers, they're more speed, quickness type pass rushers. But Khalil Mack is kind of putting that narrative on his head. His ability to take people right down the pipe, be able to kind of bull rush them, the way he uses his long arm to get into their chest and then sets up everything off of that. We haven't seen people that have been able to just kind of bully people off the edge. Khalil Mack and his ability to get home and create disruption as a power-based rusher is something that we hadn't seen. He probably would be prototype 1B when it comes to building the perfect edge rusher.
I'm right there with you. I can't argue with that. Khalil Mack's been an outstanding pro and somebody that doesn't come around very often. Talk about a once-a-decade type player.